wanted to talk real quick about what a career in marine science or marine conservation entails, given my journey. So I'll briefly go down how I got here and what I'm planning to do for the next few years, and also talk in general about the field of marine science and conservation as well. So I actually grew up in San Diego, California, very outdoorsy kind of person, always grew up on weekends backpacking, camping, near the ocean. I always wanted to do something in conservation or in STEM fields, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, so I didn't know if I initially wanted to be like a park ranger or something outdoors, and then I was like, well, I kind of like research, and I kind of went down that route, but I went to undergrad and I got my master's both at UC Santa Barbara. And at UC Santa Barbara, through both of those degrees, I was able to get a lot of research experience from a wide ranging of things. So I actually started off my sophomore year. I was really interested in ladybugs, really random. I saw an email from like a listserv saying, hey, we need volunteers to actually curate ladybug species to assess the efficacy of restoration efforts in this area of California, basically by curating a bunch of these ladybug species. I didn't really know, I thought there was only one ladybug species out there. It turns out there's over 300. And so I thought that was pretty cool, but then I realized that with my big hands, I'm not really good at using, detailing and actually sticking little tiny insects. So I realized I kind of hated that part. So I decided to go more into actually looking at the sandy beach ecosystem, because I grew up along the coast. I was really curious about insects still, but I was like, okay, so how does that actually interact with then the nearshore or the sandy beach? So I did a whole project on understanding what certain insects on the beach actually prefer what certain kelp species. So again, we're in California, so we actually have a lot of kelp that gets washed up on shore. And so I did a whole project basically to understanding like what is the most nutritious or what they prefer, which is really random because I, again, didn't realize that there was even a whole community within the sandy beach. And that's actually the main food source for birds, for example. And then I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I did a bunch of curations of these said insects, again, for a museum and for other projects. So I was like, okay, so I've gone from the terrestrial world with bugs. I'm now close to the ocean. What if we just dove in and go actually into the water? And so there was a project at UCSB that wanted to understand the coral reef resilience in French Polynesia to marine heat waves, but also to hurricanes, and how they can recover over time. And that, I never actually went there, but I was the one who was analyzing all of the these what you call a quadrat, and I would basically take the area or the amount of space along a quadrat to then over time record how much a coral is actually growing from either post or pre a stress event, so a marine heat wave or a post-cyclone event. And so that got me pretty interested. Yes?
Where was that at, though?
This right here?
Yeah.
This is in Moorea, French Polynesia. Yeah. And then I knew I didn't really want to go straight into grad school. I didn't really know still what I wanted to do. I feel like I needed more experience. And so I was actually a field tech for the state, both still in Santa Barbara, but I was working on this decadal, so a 10-year survey of the marine protected area network along California. And given my experience in the nearshore, I actually helped do what was called a beach sink. So we would actually take this big net, pull it out, and then count how many fish are in the surf zone. And we would compare that from a protected area to a non-protected area, from all the way from San Diego all the way up to Humboldt County, so all the way north of California. And in doing that, we also we would find some really cool species. So like shovel-nosed guitarfish, for example, tons of leopard sharks, some really rare species that you would typically find more in protected areas, which I really enjoyed. And so I realized I was actually quite interested at this point into actual fish species and marine life. And so I kind of was starting to understand what I wanted to do. And a part of the study was using what's called a baited remote underwater video camera. And so this allows us to actually detect what species are in the water that are more skittish towards humans. And so we actually would put a little bit of squid in here, and then a weight and then a GoPro, and then we would swim out and then deploy them and let them record for like about an hour or so. And in doing so, we actually were able to find some pretty cool species. So this is a video that we sent to the state. And so we would have an intern who would actually, by frame, record and count every single species by frame. So that's 30 frames a second. So that was a lot of work. But you see some pretty cool stuff. So it made it really worth it to me. Like there's some leopard shark that's down in La Jolla in San Diego. And what's so important about this too is that in the surf zone, it's a pretty important food resource for a lot of fisheries. So a lot of people actually go fish and eat these surf perch, even stingrays and such. So we really were trying to ensure that these communities stay resilient and stay abundant over time. Some sculpins. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to show a fun video. But then if you notice, didn't do a lot of actual like in-lab work experience. So again, before I wanted to go dive into the whole grad school phenomenon, I wanted to understand more about like how or experience what lab work actually entails to see if I'm actually interested. I did enjoy it a lot. But what I did here was I helped a PhD student who was basically, it was like a methods project where she was trying to see if you can actually detect crustaceans and marine invertebrates, so even starfish, sea urchins, within water using what's called environmental DNA. So it's already been proven that when a fish swims throughout the water column, they shed a bunch of DNA through mucus or through fish scales and whatnot. So it's really easy to detect, or relatively easy to detect that DNA from water. But what about species that don't shed that much DNA? And so that was kind of the project, and the results are basically wishy-washy, but that's science. But I was the one who was in charge of actually sequencing and extracting the DNA. So I would get the water samples and add a bunch of chemicals, go through what's called a centrifuge, and then collect the actual DNA on these little pieces of mesh that's in these little vials. And so I did that for quite some time, for about a year as well, which I thought was really enjoyable. And throughout this time, and through networking and through talking to a bunch of people, I started to really understand what I wanted to do. And I wanted to kind of bridge all this experience and really focus on conservation, but also what I call ecology, so studying on actual marine fish species. And so that's what led me into studying what's called a giant sea bass. I have always been an avid diver throughout California, and so it's like a rite of passage as a scuba diver to see one of these fish species in California, because they are the largest resident fish in the entire state. So they can get up to about 700 pounds, and they're quite rare. And so when I saw that there was some research happening within an adjacent lab, I was like, okay, how do I have some questions, I'm really interested, can I apply to conduct research on the species within your lab? And I got into the lab and I was able to study this incredible species. And so what I did for part of it was I actually, because it's so rare, we basically have no idea what the species, what the population is, how they move, really anything. And so my first question was, I wanted to understand how can they, what's their population size within California? And so I'll go a little bit further down that route, but another little side project I did was I wanted to also understand their spatial movements, because my main concern is that we know that they are very highly migratory species. So they move all over to California, but we don't know where they go at all. And there's a lot of toxic spill sites around the LA Bay, because way back when they dumped what's called DDT into the water. And so my biggest fear is, if we're trying to protect these species, we need to also know where they're going to ensure that they're not dying from these toxic waste spills. So this is still an ongoing project that takes years for research, but what I did for my little side project was I would go out and dive and bait the water and then get up real close and actually tag them. So that's me right there. But with these little, what's called a mini PAT, which I can go down to the science about these, but these are brand new, this is a brand new technology that beforehand you have to create a whole, what's called an acoustic array. But nowadays you can actually track someone, it's kind of like an air tag, but without having, like, you're able to track a species in real time throughout the water column, which is like unheard of. I mean, these are not cheap pieces of technology, but it's groundbreaking research that we can now use for a variety of species, which is really cool. But to go back into my main research is, right before I started, some researchers determined that giant sea bass have unique spot patterns, which is really unique. So think of it as kind of like a fingerprint. And so some researchers, mostly at Carnegie Mellon University, developed this machine learning algorithm that's able to actually use and actually identify these species using the spot patterns. And that was the actual original code for that was actually through the NASA Hubble telescope, because some really smart researchers realized that these little spots can also be used as star constellations, the same kind of concept. And that's how they actually orient the Hubble telescope, by looking at the star constellations and knowing where in the space, where in the galaxy it is, which is fascinating to me. But so to go into a little tech demo to kind of showcase how this works, I want you guys to all actually identify some potential matches to see if we can identify them ourselves.
Just write them on your survey to keep track.
Yeah, keep
and
track.
Whoever gets points will get extra raffle entries also.
Yeah. So out of these four, which ones do we think is an actual match?
What do you have again?
Sorry?
What is question?
We're trying to identify which of these is the same fish, essentially. So which one is it? Is it A, D, C, B, A, B, C, D? That's what we're trying to get. And then write your answers down, because I have a few of them to see if everybody, I think last year someone got all of them.
Yeah, somebody did really well last year.
Yeah. Let me know when we all have written down.
Should we say like a 30-second timer?
Yeah. How about like in 30 seconds I'll put those to the next slide. It takes time. All right, I will go to the next one. What about these photos? This one's a bit harder. It gets harder and harder. And what about, I think this is the last one. What about this one? This is the hardest one. Actually, I have one more. I'm mean. All right, then I've got a bonus one. What about this one? This one's really hard. And so, what if I told you that for my master's, I had to analyze 4,000 of these images? So, how does one do that? How is that possible? How on earth can that happen? So I want to real quick go down the potential or the actual answers. So for the first one, what do we think? You can say what you think.
AD.
Okay, I heard A, B, and AD. AD. All right, correct. You guys got that one right. And a big indicator for that one was actually not the spots. It's actually its little split fin here. So the nickname for this fish is actually tri-tail because of that. But yeah, it has this unique little diagonal spot pattern that's a little bit hard. But I tried to get an angle one that was a little bit difficult. Okay, how about the next one? CD.
BD.
All right. CD.
Good job.
And so this one's really tricky because this one has a little scratch here. So this is actually an older image and it actually fully healed. So fish, so it's hard because you can use the caudal fin as an indicator, but this actual body heals remarkably quick. And so that's hard. And also to like a flash of the camera, it can get really tricky.
Me, I did use the dot.
Sorry.
The dot.
Yeah, exactly. These dots here, it's kind of like a little pattern here.
No, that was the dot.
Yep. Exactly. And also they get older, so they also stretch a little bit as well. All right, next one. What about this one? Okay.
BC.
Okay, we'll go. There you go. Let's see. All right, so I was being kind of mean, and I purposely angled this photo a little bit to make it a little bit harder. But you see here, it's got like a little 4 here, 4 there, and then there's 2 right here. That's kind of how I can tell. It takes a lot of practice. All right, and then I think the last one here is by far the hardest. I heard A and C.
AB.
AB. Okay, what if I told you it was AD? And so again, there's a lot of substrate in the water, so it's really hard to tell with this one. But you can kind of see these little spots here, and it's the same right here. But that's borderline impossible.
So make sure you write your points on your survey, and
Yeah.
you'll get extra entries on that one.
Okay, so like I said before, there has to be an easier way. How on earth was I able to do that for 4,000 images with that combination is, 14 to the, I don't want to know, 4,000 to the 4,000th power. So thanks to machine learning, we're able to actually expedite this process quite quickly and actually have computers do this for us. So what we do is, from that old image that I said previously, we actually would have people who would, once a person would submit an image, we would actually identify all these spots and then run it through this machine learning algorithm that I mentioned before, and then it would give us potential matches, and it would give us match scores. So the higher the score, the higher the likelihood, and also give us out of the possible. So for this one, it was 9 possibilities. And then we'd actually have a person who would actually make sure that it's correct and actually identify it with their hands. But again, instead of having to compare against 4,000 images, we can compare against 9. So it makes it much quicker, which is makes it a lot easier for me. And so what we did with this is, again, if we're trying to understand the actual population size and identify these species, we can use machine learning to make things a lot quicker, but we still need images. And so how on earth I don't have the time to go out and dive across all of California and take all these photos. If I see one, again, they're quite elusive and quite rare. So we actually asked the recreational diving and fishing community to submit photos. And so we have it's a citizen science project where we actually have people, we do a bunch of outreach and a bunch of conventions, and we now have gotten, I think it's like over 200 people to submit these images. And the great thing about photography, right, is that you can submit photos from way back when. So we have images dating from 1997 to current day. And so throughout my master's, I was constantly going to conventions, giving public talks, trying to get out the outreach. And so that's another big part of you know, a career, especially in marine conservation, especially conservation side of things, is you have to be very, you have to get the word out and actually try to explain things in a way that is meaningful and understandable to all types of people. So we would actually have little shirts and hats and stuff like that. And then I gave a big talk at the Aquarium of the Pacific a few months ago, actually.
Nice.
But now, so I completed all that, and I was like, okay, I now understand the importance of marine conservation and what my real interests are, but I kind of want to go bigger picture. So instead of focusing on one species, what if I focus on the actual community itself, and how can I make a bigger impact to actually preserve and ensure food resiliency across communities? And so I also still wanted to incorporate some more advanced technology and machine learning into what I'm doing, and so I found this incredible lab at UH Manoa through the Hawaii Institute of Marine Ecology, the Liz Maiden lab, who does exactly that. And so what I'm currently doing for my dissertation is I've teamed up with this community org called Manuiwa Okamalanai, who is looking at creating a marine managed area across the windward side in Kailua and Lanikai, but they have this idea of from talking store with them and understanding that this used to be extremely abundant fishing grounds. However, nowadays it's not as much, and so they're trying to create this MMA, but they don't exactly know what best strategies to do so, and also ensure that people can still fish and enjoy that resource. And so what I'm trying to do is use a modeling approach to actually understand what's the best strategies to ensure that people can still use and enjoy recreational fishing, but also can ensure that we actually have sustainable fish communities, you know, for future generations. And a lot of modeling will come about with this, but also what I'm still trying to do too is add the impacts of a marine managed area on coral reefs itself. And so what a lot of past researchers have done within our lab is actually use machine learning in a different way. So they take photos of a coral reef, and they have a bunch of crazy machine learning algorithms that's able to actually identify what is coral and what is sand or substrate in an instantaneous amount of time. That if you remember what I said before, when I worked on stuff in French Polynesia, I had to do this by hand, where I had to draw it out, and it still isn't as accurate as this is. And so for my 1 hour of time drawing, they can do this in like a second. So it's quite impressive.
Yeah, is that a heat map?
It's not a heat map per se, it's the same image, but it's just showing like the red is coral, and then the green is sand or rock.
Yeah, but what type of scenario are you able to use for that to rapidly?
Yeah, so this was done, I want to say it was what's called a machine learning algorithm that was created in Python that they then incorporated into a desktop application called ArcGIS that they then run it through, and how they are able to detect what is actually through the color pixelations, which I have a better slide I think next that kind of showcases it a bit more. So this was a paper that was published about, I think, last year in our lab, where if we're trying to assess the coral reef across Hawaii, again, it's time and effort to just put these little quadrats across all of Oahu. And so what we decided, or what we determined is like, okay, can we use drones for this? Is there a way to make it a lot quicker? And so they tested this in this paper where they did both in-water surveys and through a drone. And they were able to actually, with 97% accuracy, determine not only how the coral reef is doing, but the rugosity, so how structured the reef is, and using what's called fractal dimension, which is, again, being able to identify what's what in an extremely precise way. So instead of us having to go in the water and spend that time and money to survey the reef, we can now just fly a drone over it, and we can run this through the algorithm, and it does it arguably in a more accurate manner than what we've been doing currently. And so there's a lot of, especially within Hawaii, there's tons of marine biology conservation careers out there. And so there's a lot of avenues and outlets that you can go. You can go the enforcement route and do the Fish and Wildlife, National Park Service, or DAR, the Department of Aquatic Resources. You can go more research, which is kind of what I'm doing. So again, that's still DAR, but working with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, the Nature Conservancy, for example, and the University of Hawaii. And these are just examples, because there's plenty more. And then you can work with community-based resource management. You can work with the fish ponds and do outdoor education. If you're more interested in data science, more of the data science thing, there's actually a lot of outlets that way, especially within consulting. And also, if you want to help plan out and make our cities and communities more ocean resilient, there's a lot of jobs within the state and federal groups as well. And so I did want to touch base too and talk a little bit about this career as a whole. This is just my path, and everyone has their own avenues and journeys. But when it comes to like, how did you get to where you are? I was extremely annoying. So be the squeaky wheel. It really works. Where just the cold emails are totally fine. Like a lot of people get really hesitant to, make that first step. But people do, even if they don't notice, or like if they don't respond to you, they do notice when you do send emails. And there's definitely a way to do it though. But just step out of your comfort zone and do what you think what you want to do, essentially. And then also, to be completely blunt here, is I do this for pure passion for the ocean and for what I find, like, this is what I believe I was meant to do. This is not a career that you want to do if you want to make a ton of money. For me, it's more of what's that quote where it's you don't work a day in your life if you pursue your passion. That's what I like to say, because yes, I'm not making a ton of money, but I'm also able to be on the ocean and do what people like to make a lot of money for, to do what I do every day. But that being said, a lot of people do think that marine science is purely out in the field, and it can be for certain people, but a lot of it actually is still desk work, data science-y, writing papers, things like that. So there's still definitely a balance. And for me, I would say experience is extremely important. So it's hard to know what you want to do if you haven't tried it yet. So just go out and do what you find, especially within research. Just if you see something kind of cool, if you see like a volunteering activity with something, you're like, that sounds kind of cool. I didn't really think about that. Just try it out. Worst comes to worst, you just don't like it. That's always been my alter ego for that. And then also start local and build relationships. This is extremely important in Hawaii as well too. So if you're trying to network or understand new opportunities or what's happening, just talk to your local stewards, talk to people with the fish pond, researchers at UH, and that's basically how it starts. Because I mean, the point of, for marine conservation at least, is to ensure that we have food and healthy ecosystems for the future. And so there's a lot of passionate people in this field. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And I think that is all I